So hello everyone and welcome back to your next lesson of client collectors. So we're going to be continuing with the front door design during this lesson. So last time you were asked to create a mood board. Now this is example one. So we've got lots of nice images here, lots of colors, and we've got a little bit of annotation as well to help understand why you've chosen such images. Now today, before we get cracking with the design, what we're going to do is have a little bit, it's something called inclusive design. Okay, so inclusive design, it's a design process or more of a way of thinking that allows a product or a situation or an outcome to be accessible or to be usable by all. So for example, if you look at the image here, you've got this woman in a wheelchair and she's not able to access this building without help. Certainly somebody could help lift her wheelchair, but that's not particularly ideal. You want to encourage this woman's independence. She should be able to get into that building on her own. Now, other people that might have issues with steps, such as people that need to take a bike into the building, it's not ideal to carry it either. And of course, you've got young families with prams that need to go up and down stairs. So one way for all of these people to access the building is to provide a ramp. So a ramp is an inclusive design because it's something that allows everybody equal access to something. Now, when we were talking to Billy last lesson, she told us that she lives with her grandmother who uses a wheelchair. So that's something that we have to consider in our design because it's not just for Billy, it's for her grand too. Now, it's important that we consider the key measurements of our door design. So obviously we've got the reach, okay, so how high the door handle is going to be. That's not something that you might think about as you're walking about a building or using doors, but it's certainly something that if someone in a wheelchair, if they came up to a door and the handle was far too high, that's going to be an issue. Also, the width of the door comes into play because you need to be able to get your wheelchair through with a little bit of play at either side, so you're not going to be banging into the door or catching the wheels or anything like that. So the height of the handle and the width of the door is something that we should really be considering when we are designing our door. Now, we've got a little numeracy task here. So a wheelchair user is unable to reach as high as someone that is standing. This must be considered when placing handles on a door. Looking at the different doors below, calculate the height of the handles to determine which one is suitable. Okay, so what we need to know is that the maximum height a door handle can be for a wheelchair user is 86 centimeters off the ground. So looking at these three division sums, I'd like you to work out which one of these doors would be suitable or which one of the handle heights is suitable for our wheelchair user. So what I want you to do is pause the video. You can write your workings down on a little piece of paper and then you can upload that image onto your file afterwards. So pause the video, have a go, and then come back once you're ready. Okay, so we're just going to do this one together. It's a nice simple one. So we've determined which door is suitable for the handle height, and now we're going to work out how wide it should be. Now, a standard wheelchair is 106 centimeters wide. Okay, so the width of the door frame, according to standards, should be 10 centimeters on each side of that 106 centimeters. So what we really need to be looking at is we've got the 106 of the wheelchair, we've got 10 centimeters of free space on one side and 10 centimeters on the other side. So we're interested in that total width. So to get that, I'm sure you've worked out before me. You've got your 10 plus 106 plus 10, and that should give us 126 centimeters wide. So that's our two key measurements, the 86 centimeters handle off the floor and 126 centimeters wide to allow the wheelchair user to use it with the same accessibility as everyone else that's using that door. So before we get cracking with the front door design, I just want to talk a little bit about what we don't want you to do. So when people are thinking of designing a front door, they go rectangle, we've got handle, a letterbox, maybe a window, nothing that looks particularly special. This looks like every average front door. And then we've got a big number there, 25, just like the side of a wheelie bin. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think that looks particularly great. So let's scrap anything that's going to look like that. We're going to use our creative sense, and we're going to really, really rely on our mood boards. I know I've printed my mood board off here, but this is going to work the exact same whether you've got it on your screen, on your computer, whether you've got it on your phone. Just as long as that image is in front of you somewhere, this task will be absolutely fine. Now, in a minute, I'm going to trace over some of the images on the sheet. Now, if you don't have tracing paper or anything like that, there's another video that's attached to this lesson called Tracing Hacks. And that's a way, a kind of workaround, if you like, to help you pull shapes if you're not so confident with just being able to draw them out. Okay? Now, I'm looking at my mood board. I'm looking at the shapes here. I like the squirrel. I quite like the swirl on the snail. Now, just by creating that little frame with my fingers, I was able to kind of cut off little sections of the mood board and see which looks best. Now, I've decided that I'm quite interested in the shape of this bird here. I quite like, he's a little bit chubby, he's a bit rounder. He's got a nice tail, and I just like the shape of the silhouette of that bird. So just quite quickly, I'm just sketching this out freehand just to have a look at what it looks like without the background. Now, I'm quite happy with that shape. I quite like it. So now I'm going to use this shape to create my design. Now, we can call this shape manipulation. It's when we take one shape and we can repeat it over and over, or we can just repeat it once and then maybe flip it around, turn it horizontally, turn it vertically, reverse it on itself. So to do that, I'm going to need to have this exact same shape, but I'm going to need multiple of it. So I'm just making that line very dark here so that I can see through my sheet of paper to get that. Now, you might not be able to see it on your screen there, but when I'm doing this in the actual room, it was fine. I could see through it. So I'm just going to make a copy of that shape, and then I'm probably going to cut it out so that I can physically move the shapes around without having to draw them and rub them out again. Okay, and there we go. Perfect copy there. Now, like I said, that video tracing hacks can show you different ways to do that to make it a bit easier for yourself. I'm just going to roughly cut this out to start with anyway, and then have a play around with it to see how it looks on the paper. And like I said, it doesn't have to be white paper. You can use any kind of scrap paper. We're just looking for shapes. So now I'm playing about with it physically. Just having a look. That's me reversing it there. Okay, that's quite nice underneath. We've got that symmetry going on. Double it up. Now, I've just made one copy of the shape. There's no reason why you can't make 3, 4, 5. Put them in concentric circles, put them in lines, overlap them with each other, create new shapes with those shapes. Go nuts with this. It's your front door design. Ooh, that's quite nice. Now, being able to do this physically with the sheet of paper allows you to explore some possibilities that you might not have before, because that would involve drawing it and rubbing it out, and that process can take a long time, and you can get a bit, annoyed with it. So this is a really simple way to kind of move around with these shapes. That one looks like a tooth or a pair of pliers. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to roughly sketch out 3 different ideas. Now, you don't have to do this. So like I said, you don't have to draw 3 initial ideas out on the paper. This part of it is not going to be marked. It's just your final design we're looking at. However, I find this step particularly helpful because it lets you get your ideas from your head onto paper, and then you can evaluate them as they're physically in front of you. So I've got 2 options there using the shapes as I've arranged them, and then I'm going to go for a wild card option. I'm going to use that whole shape as the main shape of the door. However, I'm thinking in the back of my head here that this door has to be suitable for a wheelchair user, so it's probably not going to be ideal, but that's okay. No idea is a bad idea at the minute. We're just getting things on paper to have a look at. And then we've got idea 1, idea 2, and idea 3. Okay, so when it comes to sketching out your door design, what I'd like you to do is take a big sheet of paper, so A4, And we're going to try and fill the whole area with our door design. So we're going to leave a band around the edge and just have most of the paper is going to be your drawing space. Now, that band around the edge, that's going to be filled up with annotation later on. So we'll leave that blank for now. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm just writing down my success criteria. So I need to do all of these things in order for my design to be successful. Now, as I do these things, or as I complete these sections of the design, I can cross it off my list, and then I know I've done everything that I've been asked to do. Now, those shapes I cut out of my paper earlier, they're going to come in handy again, because I'm going to go back to my ideas. I've decided on that first one, and I'm going to use that shape to trace around, and then I'll get quite an accurate representation of the shape from my mood board right onto my design. So I'm going to use the snail pattern on the shell, those swirls, to break up these shapes. I've got the birds in order to make my stained glass window. So I've just kind of loosely copied over that swirly pattern, and I'm going to define it with my pen. Now, stained glass windows, they're beautiful. They're known to be colorful, and they're all made up of different little sections of glass. So that's how I'm going to break up my panels. I'm going to use the pattern from the snails. Now, I'm sure your mood boards will full of lots of different patterns. It might be feathers or leaves or the lines on your trees and the bark, mushrooms. There's loads of different lines, loads of different patterns for you to play around with. So I'm just paying attention to those lines on the snail. Some are thick, some are thin, some are closer together. And I've done that. So now I'm going to score it off on my success criteria. I've put a window in, and I've used shapes from my mood board. Now I'm going to concentrate on that handle now. I thought I'll try to be a bit cheeky. I'll use the hand or the squirrel, but in fact it looks ridiculous. So we'll scrap that, we'll rub it out. Nothing's set in stone yet. Have a look for other shapes. So let's concentrate on this mushroom. I've not paid any attention to that. We know round is a good shape to go in somebody's hand. It's easy to hold. It's nice to turn, so it'd be a perfect handle. Now, if you remember back to when we were talking about the wheelchair users, we knew that that handle should be 86 centimeters off the ground. So that's a good piece of annotation to put there. So I'm just going to make sure I've got a note of that. You see, I'm using that space around the door. I'm going to start slowly filling it up with pieces of annotation. There we go. I used a pattern from the snail's shell to create the window. There we go. I'm talking about that round shape, which is called ergonomics. It's how products or things or like a handle interacts with the human body. Okay, so I'm going to quickly, I'll probably do a speedy video of me completing the rest of the door design. And then feel free to watch it or feel free to crack on with your own. So I'm using my paints here to color in my door design. Obviously, if you don't have paints, that's fine. You can use pencils or crayons, or you can even cut pieces of scrap paper and stick them on like a collage. However you want to color it is up to you. With the colors I'm choosing, I've not just pulled them out of thin air. They're very closely represented in the images of the snail and the forest to the side. So I'm pulling those kind of autumnal colors for the stained glass panels in the window. So I'm just pulling those colors again to fill in the back of the door, going with some nice greens and browns. I think they'll complement the autumnal colors, the warmer colors on the glass. It looks a little bit patchy at the moment, but that's okay. I'm going to go over it with a pen later on to kind of refine some of that detail. Now, I chose to make the door out of wood, so I'm going to add some of that wood grain in just a minute once the paint dries here. So here I've added in the wood grain, just some nice planks, some detail with the knots, and I'm just about to finish my design really. But what I think could make this a bit better is some more annotation, telling me about those materials, remembering to put in the dimensions of the width of the door, especially for the wheelchair users we've got there. Some more about the colour scheme that we've chosen. So all good doors require hinges. So I'm just going to add this on as a last detail. So I've pulled those shapes from the leaves I've got there, and I'm just making a tiny little template to see where the placement should go and if it would look okay. So I've decided that's fine. So I'm going to add that in. And I'm going to go over it with a dark pen just to refine those details. Now, most hinges come in pairs. They usually look the exact same. But down the bottom of my door design, I've put the window in the corner. So it's going to be difficult to put a hinge in this area. So I'm just going to, again, take a scrap piece of paper, make a little template, and seeing where I can fit that hinge in around it. It might have to be slightly different to the one at the top, but that's okay. It's organic. We're going with a leafy theme, things from the forest. Not everything's going to be perfect. So I'm quite happy with that. And again, the important annotation explaining what I've done and why I've done it. And the only thing left to do is show my work to the forest inspector and see if she approves. I think she likes the glass. Yeah, that's getting a thumbs up. That's okay. Double checking the mood board. Have I done the success criteria? Yes, everything looks in order. She's quite happy. Alrighty, so good luck everyone. Can't wait to see what you do with your designs.